Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us again for the Dare Dallas webinar. Second one in this second series or second season if you're in the United States, but it's lovely to see everyone again. First of all, thank you for everyone that joined us last week for my lovely conversation that I had with Jonathan Horwich. Some really great feedback, obviously, on the Winston Churchill painting that would belong to Angelina Jolie that's coming up in March. Now, recently and of late, we've seen a lot more work in terms of jewellery valuations, and it does take a significant amount of our time. Now, because of this, we've actually brought in a new face to the group, and we're really happy to welcome Annabell Parry. So, Annabell, thank you ever so much for joining me today, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, Alastair. Afternoon. I am a registered jewellery valuer. I am a member of both UK institutes, that is the Institute of Jewellery Valuers and the Jewellery Valuers Association. To become a member of either of the groups, there's quite a few elements that they do want you to do. It includes 5 years in the trade, 5 years trade experience. You need a gemological association qualification, and also you need to be able to pass the CAT, the certificate of appraisal theory exam. Try saying that after a glass of wine. And once you have done all of those, then you have CPD points annually. Like a lot of institutes, and every 3 years we are monitored by the institutes. It is an awful lot, and a lot of people ask me, why on earth would you go to all that trouble? It's a very good question. For me, you get to see some of the most amazing pieces of jewellery, beautiful workmanship, beautiful period pieces. You have people who invite you into their lives and to actually have a look at their family pieces, pieces that have crossed generations. Sometimes they know nothing about them at all, and they simply want that connection with the past. And I have to put a value on that. And so to be able to do that, you need a long time dealing with jewellery, and often decades actually experience to be able to look at them.
It's a fascinating world, isn't it, to be honest, Annabell? And as you quite rightly say, it's one of those things, you're delving into people's history and you're looking at the items that they've amassed, and I think in many instances possibly don't have a clue of what they are or what they're worth. So being a member of the JVA and the IRV is obviously a really important thing for you, but it also gives you that assurance with a jewellery valuation, doesn't it?
You're absolutely right. Believe it or not, our industry is not regulated by the government. We have to, the jewellery side of things, we have to self-regulate. And so particularly with the Institute of Registered Valuers, who've been going for about 40 years now, I come after a very, very long line of very, very driven valuers who really have codified what a valuation is over the years and has made it accessible to everybody. Because certainly, I'm sure you'll know, back in the day, certainly of my father's time, who was a valuer and an auctioneer, valuations could be written on anything at all. Particularly for insurance companies these days, for HMRC, for the police, they do need far more detailed documentation. And with the institute and being a jewellery valuer in the way I am, it means that members of the public and institutions have that knowledge of the quality of the report that we're going to write for them, and particularly importantly, that it can actually be defended in court, should it need to be.
No, definitely. I'm inclined to agree with you on that. Obviously, I think 20 or 30 years ago, or so, to be honest, probably even 10 years ago, you used to get things, and I've seen them, and I'm sure you've seen them, where people have received a previous jewellery valuation. It's written down on a scrap of paper and it says diamond ring, £2,000 or something along that. No proper measurements, no proper wording, no weights, no kind of actual decent kind of cataloguing even for a valuation. So what the IRV and the JVA does is really assure the client that they will be getting a level of service and a level of valuation really that is worthy of their pieces.
Absolutely. And again, 3-4 decades ago, the likes of me, there won't have been very many. And we could only work for a certain number of people. Our services were not available really to everybody, and they're affordable as well. And that's one of the joys about being brought in with the Dare Dallas partnership. It means as more people have access to the likes of my experience, and at sensible prices, because it happens almost every week or every 10 days. I have a customer who realizes actually what they have, and the idea of having it valued or looked at or even getting it out of the drawer is really too much of a hassle. Or it's going to cost a fortune to get it done, or it's going to take weeks, or we're going to have to send it away. You don't. You absolutely don't. And your insurance company will be absolutely delighted with you. So it is becoming more and more accessible for people.
Fantastic. Now, obviously, the key to any valuation, whether it be for jewellery, paintings or anything else, is the methodology and the way in which you conduct a valuation. So can you talk us through some of the stages and maybe the ways in which you would conduct a valuation?
Yes, of course. Are you sitting down?
By all means.
So first of all, it will slightly alter for every single piece that we do. But if I'm looking at a diamond set piece, we always start with the stones. And first of all, we will count the stones. I had one recently with 400 stones in it. And each of those stones we need to measure. Now, remembering each of those, they are mounted, we can't weigh them. So we have to calculate them actually in their mount. So we will take at least 3 measurements, if not 7 or 8 measurements from the stones. And then we use a formula to actually work out the weight of each diamond or gemstone in there. So once we've done that, we then need to look at the color of the stones, be it a ruby or a diamond. And then we need to look at the clarity, what hallmarks are in there, what inclusions are in there. And then we start coming up with a better idea of the weights and the qualities of the stones. At the back of your mind, all the time, you need to be thinking, does it look right? Is it right? Has it been treated in some way? Has it been heated? Has it been played with in some way? Actually, is it what it is purporting to be? Is it glass? And so you need to take it sort of in a very holistic way, and your experience tells you if it looks wrong or actually, wow, I've got something pretty amazing here.
I think it's quite funny, because I've certainly had it in the past, and no doubt you have as well. You're looking at a piece of jewellery and you're looking at an old valuation of that piece of jewellery, and you're actually looking at the two and you're thinking, these two just simply aren't the same thing, and they've given you the wrong valuation with the wrong item. And it's amazing how many people, unfortunately, don't know what they've got there. I'm just going to bring up an image, obviously, of some of the kit that you actually take with you to a valuation to use. Can you talk us through some of the things that you actually use when you're conducting one of those valuations?
Yes, of course. So this is just a very small, very small proportion of my kit. This is portable kit, all of this. If I do home visits, this is going to be my portable kit amongst some other books and bits and pieces that I'll bring. So particularly looking at the diamonds and so I've got a microscope there, I have a loupe. There's a gauge in the front there as well, which is used for actually measuring. Then we have just at the back a diamond light, which is essential when we're actually grading diamonds. We need to actually be able to look at it in north-facing light. We have the white box down at the front. Those are actually CZs. They're cubic zirconias, but they are coloured from D down to M, which are diamond colours. Those are my master set, which I compare diamonds next to when I am on home visits. So I have a fairly good eye myself, but those actually give me a benchmark against which if something is an F colour diamond. You can see scales, you can see a spectroscope, you can see a UV light. There's all manner of tricks to the trade, essentially, that we need to look at particularly the stones, to make sure we've got the right thing, we've calculated the size correctly. Going on from talking about doing the valuation, once we'll look at the stones, but it's also important sometimes where they've come from. Particularly with coloured stones, you'll have heard from, obviously, particularly in the last week, stones from Myanmar, Burma, if they've come from Sri Lanka, if we've got diamonds from Golconda, those I have to say come with a far smaller number of valuations, but the price difference is huge. So I necessarily, certainly on a home visit, I will not be looking into the actual locality of a coloured stone. Those elements, we then have to send stones normally off to a lab. We have to send them off to a coloured stone lab. That is the next stage. It's not very often it happens in my particular day-to-day trade, but it can do. We're also looking at obviously the whole piece of jewellery. So we need to weigh it. We need to look at the metal it's in. We will often test the metal it's in to see, because often they're not hallmarked. If it has a beautiful British hallmark, then it's absolutely wonderful. It tells me the whole history, and that's an absolute joy, particularly if we're looking at people's old wedding rings that have come down the family, and we can actually date them, and we can actually work out whose wedding rings they are because of the date often in the wedding rings or in the engagement rings. We will then look at next stages is going to be the condition of the piece. Is it brand new, or is it so tired it needs retiring? We've got the desirability of the piece. Who made the piece? Is it a Cartier piece? Is it, or is it something that was picked up off eBay? Which could also be a Cartier piece, but I think you get my meaning.
Yeah,
and then we're going to, so that fills in a little bit more of the background and the story, which is important to attributing a value to the item. So once we've really collected as much information, I know that's incredibly brief, we've collected lots of information about this singular item. Often the way I work, I will hand the item back to the customer, or there are numerous items they've wanted me to value, and then I will return to my office where the next stage of work happens. So shall I carry on?
Yes, yeah, by all means. I was going to say though, but I'm pleased to see that you've got the most important tool in a valuer's toolbox on the right hand side in a cup of tea there, which I think we all like to see, so that's great. Let's just take this one out and we'll come back to full screen again. So we're talking about, obviously, when you get back, it's actually where a lot of the work starts, really, in terms of the research and everything else that you have to do into working out potentially the source of different items, and obviously writing them up. And there is a specific methodology in the way that you write these items up, isn't there?
Again, yes, you're absolutely right. We would usually start, and again, this is hugely reduced because if you're interested, it's brilliant, and if it can be a little bit dry if you're not. But we would essentially start with items under 30 years old, which are essentially, depends, watches don't essentially come under this, but for jewellery particularly, if it's under 30 years old, we call it sort of current. And when we look at those pieces to attribute a value to them, we essentially break them down into their component parts. So you will look at the diamonds, you'll look at the gold weight, you'll look at how it's being made, is it handmade, is it cast? And you very much take those down, those parts, and look into pricing those individually. If it is a branded item, such as a Cartier piece from the last 20 odd years, often they are still in production. And as long as they have not changed massively, and when I say massively, in fact, they've not even changed a large amount at all, we will actually often draw comparisons with current items. So those are fairly straightforward. With items that we can't draw an immediate comparison, so we start looking we will use international databases for colour stones and for diamonds. They will give us the prices, the current daily prices for those. They're massive databases. For the gold prices, we use the national daily spot price. In the UK, it comes out twice a day. So again, that has to be very carefully measured. And lastly, we are also very careful about our exchange rates. Those are important because diamonds are actually, they are dealt all over the world in dollars. So as a UK valuer, I have to take into consideration particularly the US dollar rate of the day I'm doing the valuation. And that just gets us started. That's just looking at the gold weights and the stone weights. And then you start putting it all together. You've got the picture. And if it is by a famous maker, if it is particularly beautifully done, particularly beautifully put together, or it actually was thrown together by somebody in their shed. And that will all work into its final price. I would mention that if I've mentioned modern pieces, if an item is an antique, so over 100 years old, or if it's over that 30-year period, and I tend to call it a vintage piece.
Mm-hmm. Vintage is a great word at the moment. Everyone likes vintage.
It's a very wide-ranging term, but so they're not being made anymore. So we can't go out and buy one. And certainly in the case of an insurer trying to replace your item, we can't easily go and find you a comparable. So we need to find multiple items, similar items that have traded through auction houses or sometimes through the second-hand market. But we have to find multiple to actually back up our cost decision. And that can sometimes take quite some time to find the right ones, to make sure that especially if we're doing a valuation for insurance, that the customer is covered to the right amount and can replace with similar items that we know they're coming through the auction houses, maybe sporadically, but at least they are coming through, and we can place a value. And it also gives the insurance companies a good idea of how often these things are coming through and the sort of time frame it might take for them to be able to replace. Lastly, we do have, luckily enough, some really super items coming through very sporadically, and they are a joy when they cross your desk, but sometimes they really are very, very rare and special. And in those cases, we will go to industry specialists who are well known for dealing with a particular type of jeweler or a type of period. And we may approach some museums, sometimes there's some very, very good galleries. In London, there's a couple of very good galleries who specialise with sort of 1900 to 1950 jewellery, and often they're unsigned, but they are becoming more and more and more collectible, so therefore the prices need to reflect that.
No, it's fascinating. It's such a broad sphere, I think, and people think that jewellery is a necklace around your neck or a ring on your finger, and it's so much more than that.
It absolutely is. People often have a piece and they can't place it in their family, and I often will value things, and people, well, we'll just sell it. It's fine. And actually, once I've been able to tell them a few elements about it, and maybe the time period it's from, and maybe there's a hallmark in it, and there's some element that ties into their family, suddenly they tell everybody, the whole family suddenly, I've had whole families on Zoom calls before today, and suddenly it becomes so much more special and will be kept within that family. And that's such a lovely thing, and I think important because in this day and age we have so many things that we buy quickly, we use up and we sell, or we move on. To actually have some pieces that go from generation to generation is, I think, important. I really do.
Absolutely. So whilst we're talking about these important items and interesting items, you very kindly sent me a few photos of a few bits and bobs that you have somewhat discovered over the past few years whilst doing what can only be called pretty much routine valuation. So let's just bring up a couple of photos that you very kindly sent me. Let's have a look here. So what can you tell me about this beautiful thing?
Yeah. So the three I'm going to talk about have all come to me in the last 12 months. And this, apologies for the photograph, it was taken very much in a fleeting meeting I had with somebody. This particular gentleman had inherited a box of jewellery, and it was a very tired, I think, box of jewellery, and he'd sort of rifled through it, couldn't find anything of any interest, and it was going to a charity shop. And he obviously had second thoughts and said, well, I'm just going to take it to Annabell and see if she can just, if it really is just really dress jewellery and can go to charity shop. So we had a quick look, and there were a couple of interesting items, but this stood out, and it's not to everybody's taste. It stood out for its elegance, really, and its period was very different to the other items. And then I turned it over, and if you could do the next slide for me.
Yeah, let me just find the next one for you. There we go.
So I turned it over, and it is signed G. Fouquet. So Georges Fouquet and his father and his son after him are very, very famous French jewelers. They're exquisite pieces, and some you would absolutely recognize. Lots of Art Deco, particularly Art Nouveau, beautiful enamel work. They really set the world on fire at the time. And I have to say, I did a little bit of research, and a necklace of theirs, a particularly fine piece, went for £750,000 a few years ago at auction. So this piece at the moment is fairly recent for me. We are currently in the process of having it authenticated. It's interesting as of a period. We think it's fairly early 20th century. And at the moment, I've talked to a few colleagues who have dealt with Fouquet pieces before, and they think it's right. They think it's absolutely right. But
it's a fascinating piece, isn't it? It's amazing when you find one of those manufacturers. And sometimes with bits like that, there are obviously things that were done bespoke, or things that weren't necessarily catalogued in the same way that a lot of trademark pieces would have been. So to actually find something with a stamp on it that is that little bit different is always a little bit more exciting. Be it Fabergé, be it Cartier, it can be anything like that. And as you say, to pick up on an item like that is fascinating.
Especially one that was going to go to a charity shop.
Well, yes, you've got to be thankful for that, haven't you?
Especially, exactly, because it was on its way out. So the family are thrilled, and so that's the next one. The next thing for me is when the world opens up, we'll be going down to London to go and see a colleague of mine who has seen an awful lot more Fouquet than myself.
Fantastic. So we were talking earlier about coloured stones, and this is a really nice example, can we say?
This was lovely. Cheshire customer. Sadly, her mother had passed on. Her mother sounded like the most fun, absolutely the most fun, and had been to Sri Lanka in the 1970s, and she had brought back a whole host of bits and pieces, garnet bracelets and amethysts, and she'd obviously had a fabulous time, but the jewellery came back, and they weren't a huge jewellery wearing family, and everything had gone into a drawer. And the years went by, and this fabulous lady passed on, and her daughter was going through her things and found all this jewellery in a drawer in her kitchen. So we went through it, and they say there were some lovely pieces, and they're lovely pieces. They're good pieces to have, to be able to wear, but not huge amounts of money. They're more sentimental than anything else. And then this appeared, and it was dirty. It was in a damaged silver mount. And usually, if something's in silver, it's not particularly high.
I was going to say silver's a bit strange for something of that nature, isn't it?
So my suspicions initially was it's probably a citrine, because we'd seen some other quartz items, and I don't know, just something about the way it shone. So we cleaned it and I tested it, and it was a sapphire. Now, there's nothing massively unusual in the fact of finding a yellow sapphire, but not only this it was such a pretty colour. It really was. It was quite a sort of its cut was fairly basic, but it sparkled, and I looked at it and it was so clear because of the time frame. I thought it's probably not had any treatment. Now, most yellow sapphires we buy today and we find they have all been treated, or a lot of them have been treated. If it has not been treated, its value is far higher. So we had this sent down to a gem lab in London who confirmed it was Sri Lankan. It was over 10 carats and it was unheated. So my lovely lady, she has since had it mounted into a brand new ring. It is in platinum, and we have insured it for £15,000.
I was going to say that'd be quite a nice, impressive ring, won't it, with a 10 carat?
It sat in a drawer for 40 years, so it is, and she loves it. And again, it's gone back into the family.
Oh, fantastic. Good for her as well. Good for her. Right. Okay. I think we've got one more item that we're going to have a quick chat about, haven't we? So it may look like a normal ring, but tell us a little bit about it.
It's this last one, if you've got time. A lady from North Wales, again, inherited a ring from a relative. And she came in to see if it was real or not, essentially. Is it real, and what sort of value, if it is? So, but I have to say, she arrived at the office and almost chucked it on the desk. She wasn't holding out any hope. And so I had a look at it. Now, not only was it, again, it was over 3 carats. I think it was about 3 carat 40. It had a lovely colour to it. The cut was so lively, and it had a nice clarity to it. And so we ended up doing a valuation for her, and the valuation was over £30,000. She went white when she got the valuation and had to go and get her husband. And so, and again, they took it home. It was a lovely surprise. And a couple of weeks later, she contacted me because they'd been doing paperwork for the relative who had obviously passed on, and they'd found the original receipt. And the original receipt had been bought in London in 1975 for a value of £2,000.
Well, I think that's probably gone up a lot better than a few things, hasn't it, for £2,000? I can't quite tell from it. Is it a brilliant cut or is it an old English cut? It's a brilliant cut.
It is a brilliant cut. It's an early brilliant cut, but yes, it is, and it was a joy, actually. It could do with remounting, but it was a joy.
I was going to say, are the claws, they look like they might be slightly different metal. Would I be right in that? Or,
You're absolutely right. You can tell it's had work over the years. Yeah. It's been worn. It's had replacement claws put on it, and it was tired. But the diamond was absolutely lovely, and you can actually chip diamonds with lots and lots of wear. However, it was absolutely, I don't think it had been worn so much. Obviously, high days and holidays maybe, but yes, that is another piece that is going to be kept in the family.
Oh, it's a fantastic piece. And again, what you're doing as a valuer is almost just as much about people's stories as it is about people's items. And you're valuing the importance of an item within a collection. And not just, obviously, we're talking about the stone and the quality of the stone there, but it is not just that, it is the importance of an item to a family and their collection as well. Well, Annabell, thank you ever so much for joining me today. We've had a lovely conversation, and no doubt you'll be looking forward to doing some more of these in the future. And we will speak some more in due course. But thank you ever so much for joining us. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for joining us as well. Please do contact us, connect with us on LinkedIn. Obviously, if you haven't seen any of our videos before, they're all on our YouTube channel, so you can actually log in and watch a few more of those, or just drop us an email if there's anything that you'd like to see us covering with any of our articles, or in fact any of the videos that we do. Please do get in touch. And I'll say bye-bye from me and Annabell.
Thanks so much.
We'll speak to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.